3 women vanished in Jersey City over the span of 6 weeks, and nobody seemed to care. Not the police, who filed reports and forgot names. Not the media, too busy chasing bigger stories. Just me, sitting in my cramped Hoboken apartment at 2 a.m, staring at faces on my laptop screen until they burned into my retinas. Michelle Torres, 24, bartender at the Dock, gone February 3rd. Sarah Kim, 22, server at Portside Grill, disappeared February 19th. Amanda Wells, 26, hostess at 3 different restaurants in 4 months, last seen March 2nd. The police called them runaways, troubled girls with money problems who probably skipped town for better opportunities. Case closed, archived, forgotten. Except Michelle's mother showed me text messages her daughter sent the day before she vanished. Normal messages. Plans for Sunday brunch. Excitement about a new apartment she'd finally saved enough to afford. Sarah's roommate told me about the carefully organized belongings left behind. Laptop, phone charger, the vintage camera Sarah treated like a child. Amanda's cousin worked with her at the last restaurant. Said Amanda seemed nervous those final days, but wouldn't explain why. These weren't women running towards something. They were women running from something. Or worse, women who never got the chance to run at all. I'd been working this story for 2 weeks, sleeping 4 hours a night, living on coffee that tasted like burnt rubber, and determination. My editor at the Jersey Tribune, Mark Sullivan, had connected me with a contact in the Port Authority after I'd pitched him the initial angle. "Be careful, Lauren," Mark had said, leaning back in his chair, with that expression he got when a story made him nervous. I've known journalists who went after organized crime stories. Past tense. Known. The warning should have scared me more than it did. Mark's contact gave me shipping manifests and surveillance blind spots. Patterns emerged like constellations in data. All 3 women worked within a 2-mile radius of the port. All had accumulated debt. Student loans, medical bills, credit cards maxed from trying to survive in a city that chewed up people like them and spit out the bones. All received job offers in the weeks before vanishing. Better pay, flexible hours, opportunities too good to refuse. I traced their last known locations through security footage from neighboring businesses, interviews with coworkers, credit card transactions that painted timelines in purchases and geography. Every trail ended at the same point. An abandoned warehouse on the eastern edge of the port, tucked between operational facilities like a rotten tooth in an otherwise functional mouth. Tuesday night, I drove past it for the first time. Didn't stop. Just rolled by slowly in my beaten Honda, windows down despite the March cold, camera in my lap. The building slouched against the night sky, windows dark and broken, graffiti climbing the walls like ivy. Nothing moved. Nothing suggested the place was anything but forgotten infrastructure waiting for demolition. Wednesday night, I parked 3 blocks away and walked. Stayed in shadows, kept my phone on silent, took photos from behind a chain-link fence. At 11:47, 2 SUVs with no license plates pulled up to a side entrance. 4 men emerged, speaking a language I didn't recognize but later realized was Spanish. They disappeared inside for 23 minutes. When they emerged, they were carrying nothing, but their body language had changed. Purpose instead of caution. Thursday night, I brought better equipment. A camera with a telephoto lens I'd borrowed from a photographer friend who owed me a favor. I positioned myself on the roof of an adjacent building, uncomfortable but with clear sight lines. More vehicles, more men, and this time, near midnight, something that made my blood crystallize in my veins. Women being led from one building into another, moving in a line like paper dolls, heads down, shoulders curved inward. I took 63 photos. Didn't realize until I was back home, hands shaking as I imported them to my laptop, that I'd captured more than I'd intended. In photo 37, a man stood illuminated by headlights, face turned toward the camera by accident or instinct. Sharp features, cold expression, scar cutting through his left eyebrow. In photo 42, he directed others while something that looked very much like a weapon glinted at his hip. I'd documented what appeared to be human trafficking, and I'd photographed faces. Friday morning, I sent the preliminary material to Mark along with a message. Need a few more days to confirm details. Before stepping inside, I sent Mark my live location and opened 911 on the keypad, one thumb press away. I also mirrored my camera roll to cloud as a dead man's switch. If they took my phone, they'd still get the pictures, and I'd still be found. This is bigger than missing persons. His response came back in under a minute. Lauren, be extremely careful. People who do this kind of work don't leave witnesses. Check in with me daily. I noticed the silver sedan that afternoon, parked across from my apartment building when I left for my shift at the coffee shop where I worked 3 days a week to supplement freelance income. Still there when I returned at 7. Could have been coincidence. Probably was, except it was parked in the same spot Saturday morning. Different angle, but same car. Same tinted windows that prevented me from seeing who sat inside. Instinct, honed by 5 years of investigative journalism and 27 years of learning to trust my gut, started screaming. I didn't photograph it, didn't confront it. Just noted the make and model, newer Nissan, well-maintained, nothing remarkable except its persistent presence, and started varying my routes. Checking over my shoulder. Locking doors I usually left unbolted. Monday, I made the connection I'd been searching for. Amanda Wells wasn't just a statistic in my missing persons pattern. She was Michelle Torres's second cousin. They'd worked at the dock together before Michelle vanished. Amanda had transferred to 3 different restaurants since then, never staying longer than 6 weeks. She was running, and she was still alive. I found her through the restaurant grapevine, that informal network of servers and bartenders who always knew who was hiring and who was quitting, and who had drama worth discussing. Amanda Wells currently worked at Lucia's, an upscale establishment that catered to business professionals and people with expense accounts. Tuesday afternoon, I called the restaurant, asked for Amanda by name. When she came to the phone, her voice was guarded, suspicious of strangers who knew her schedule. My name is Lauren Reed. I'm a journalist investigating the disappearances of Michelle Torres and Sarah Kim. I know you were close with Michelle. I think you might be in danger. Silence stretched long enough that I thought she'd hung up. Then quietly, I can't talk here. Come Thursday night, after 9. I'll meet you in the back dining room. Amanda, Thursday. That's all I can do. The line went dead. I should have felt relief, progress, a witness willing to talk. Instead, dread settled in my stomach like swallowed stones. Thursday evening, I drove to Lucia's through streets slick with earlier precipitation. The restaurant sat in a gentrified section of Jersey City, where old warehouses had been converted into expensive lofts and artisanal coffee shops charged $7 for lattes. Lucia's occupied the ground floor of a renovated brick building, warm light spilling from tall windows. People visible inside laughing and eating like the world was safe and predictable. I parked 2 blocks away. Checked my surroundings 3 times before locking the car. The silver sedan wasn't visible, but that didn't mean it wasn't there. Inside, Lucia's was elegant, without being pretentious. Dark wood, soft lighting, the smell of garlic and wine and fresh bread. A hostess greeted me with professional warmth. I asked for a table in the back. She led me through the main dining area to a quieter section with only 4 tables, currently empty, except for my presence. Your server will be right with you, she said, leaving me with a menu I barely saw. I ordered coffee when the server appeared. Nothing else. My stomach was too tight for food. At 8:53, Amanda emerged from the kitchen area. I recognized her from the photo her cousin had given me. Curly dark hair pulled back, large brown eyes that had seen too much. She glanced my way, nodded almost imperceptibly, then disappeared back through the kitchen doors. Waiting. Everything in journalism was waiting. At 9:12, 2 men entered the restaurant. They moved differently than the other patrons, scanning rather than looking, assessing rather than admiring. They requested a table near the entrance, positioning themselves with clear views of exits. One of them had a scar through his left eyebrow. Photo 37. The enforcer from the warehouse. Here. Now. My coffee cup rattled against the saucer when I set it down. The 2 men hadn't looked my way yet, but they would. Eventually. I was the only person sitting alone in the back section, and men like that notice details. Amanda emerged again, carrying plates to another section. Our eyes met. She saw where I was looking. Fear washed across her face like water. I needed to leave, needed to get out before they connected me to the photos, to the investigation, to the fact that I knew what they were. But the bathroom was past their table. The kitchen entrance required walking directly in front of them. The only exit was blocked. My phone was in my purse. I could call 911. Say what? That scary men were eating dinner? That I had photos of possible criminal activity, but hadn't reported it yet because I wanted a complete story first? Amanda appeared at my table so suddenly I jumped. Her hands shook as she placed a water glass I hadn't requested in front of me. She leaned close, voice barely audible. They've been asking about someone matching your description. Someone who was photographing the port area last week. You need to go. Now. I can't. They're between me and the door. Then, she glanced around desperately. I don't know. I don't know what to do. Neither did I. For the first time in my career, I had no plan, no backup, no clever way out. Just rising panic and the certainty that I'd made a critical error in judgment by coming here. The napkin dispenser Thursday night. I didn't wait for courage to grow reckless. The moment the two men took the entrance table and started mapping exits like professionals, I texted Mark a code word we'd agreed on months ago. Not blue. And walked straight into the kitchen as if I worked there. A busser held the door for me on reflex. I kept moving, head down, through the service corridor, out into the delivery alley that stank of rain and bleach. I didn't run. I disappeared. I would live to try again. Tie-ins. Amanda saw it. Her eyes went wide. She started to say something, then thought better of it, disappearing back toward the kitchen with steps that were too quick to be casual. The men at the front table were talking to each other now, glancing occasionally toward the back section, toward me. One of them pulled out his phone. I was out of time. Friday arrived with a sky that promised more precipitation before the night ended. By the time I drove back to Lucia's, darkness had settled over Jersey City, and the first drops were already streaking my windshield. I should have canceled. Should have called Amanda and told her we'd meet somewhere public and safe in daylight. But the investigative journalist in me, the part that had pushed through every obstacle for the past 5 years, wouldn't let go. Amanda needed to talk. 3 women were missing, possibly dead. If I walked away now because I was scared, what did that make me? The parking situation was worse than Thursday. I ended up 3 blocks away again, jogging through increasing downpour without an umbrella because I'd left it in my other bag. By the time I reached Lucia's entrance, my hair dripped water down the back of my jacket, and my jeans clung uncomfortably to my legs. Inside was warm, crowded, loud with Friday night energy. Couples celebrating the end of their work week. Business associates closing deals over wine that cost more per bottle than my monthly grocery budget. The hostess recognized me from the previous evening and smiled. Back again? You must really love our coffee. It's the best in Jersey City, I lied, following her through the main dining area to the same back section. 4 tables here, 2 now occupied by groups deep in conversation. I took the corner table again, the one with sightlines to both the kitchen door and the main entrance. Amanda appeared within 5 minutes. She set down a water glass and coffee without making eye contact, voice barely audible over ambient noise. He said you'd come back. The guy who was asking questions about photographers. Ice crystallized in my veins. When did he ask? Yesterday. Showed my manager a picture. Grainy, like from a security camera. Asked if anyone recognized the woman. Her hand shook as she adjusted the water glass unnecessarily. I told him I'd never seen you before. I don't know if he believed me. Amanda, I can't stay. They're watching me, too. Whatever you're doing, stop. Those women who disappeared? That's what happens when you ask too many questions. She turned to leave, then paused. I get off at 10:30. If you're still alive by then, meet me at the 24-hour diner on Grove Street, 3 blocks north. She walked away before I could respond, weaving between tables with practiced efficiency. I should have left immediately. Paid for the coffee I hadn't touched, and disappeared into the rainy night before whoever was asking questions showed up in person. But leaving meant walking past the entrance, making myself visible, confirming that, yes, the woman in the grainy photo was here, was real, was foolish enough to return. So I sat, watched the entrance like a prey animal tracking predators, checked my phone. 9:43. Mark had sent 3 messages asking for check-ins. I typed back, "At Lucia's. Meeting source. We'll call after." 9:57. A family of 4 was seated 2 tables away, the children arguing about dessert options. Normal. Safe. Everything I wasn't. 10:04. The 2 men entered. I recognized them instantly despite never seeing them this close. The one with the scar through his left eyebrow moved with the confidence of someone who'd hurt people and enjoyed it. His companion was shorter, stockier, with the build of someone who lifted weights religiously. They spoke to the hostess, requested seating near the entrance. They weren't here for dinner. The hostess led them to a table that gave them clear views of every exit. Professional positioning, the kind that came from training or experience or both. Scar Eyebrow's gaze swept the restaurant methodically, cataloging faces, dismissing most, pausing on mine for 2 seconds longer than necessary. My heart rate tripled. He didn't react, didn't signal recognition, just continued his scan before sitting with his back to the wall. But I knew. The pause. The assessment. He was comparing my face to whatever grainy image they had, deciding if I was worth approaching. I couldn't go out the front. The bathrooms were past their table, which meant walking directly into their line of sight. The kitchen was staff only, and would draw attention I couldn't afford. The only other exit was an emergency door I'd noticed Thursday, but it likely had an alarm, and would create exactly the kind of scene that would force confrontation. Trapped, like an animal in a cage, waiting for the predator to decide when to strike. The stocky one pulled out his phone, typed something, showed the screen to his companion. Scar Eyebrow nodded, then both looked directly at my table. No pretense anymore. No casual assessment. Just clear, focused attention that said they knew exactly who I was. Amanda emerged from the kitchen carrying plates for another table. She saw where I was looking, saw them looking at me. The color drained from her face. She served the plates, said something to the customers that must have been normal and polite, then walked to my table with steps that were measured and careful. "They called someone," she whispered, setting down a menu I hadn't requested. I saw the phone. "You need to go. Right now. They're between me and the door." Then, her eyes darted around desperately, searching for solutions that didn't exist. "The kitchen? You could..." "Staff only. Your manager would stop me." "The bathroom window?" 3 stories up. We were both speaking too quietly for anyone to overhear, but our body language screamed panic. People at nearby tables had started to notice. The family with arguing children glanced over, curious about what was wrong. I grabbed a napkin from the dispenser, hands moving before my brain fully processed the decision, pulled the pen from my jacket pocket, the one I always carried because journalists never knew when they'd need to take notes, and wrote 3 letters in capital block print: "Help." I placed it on the edge of the table, facing outward toward the restaurant's main section. Visible. Desperate. The kind of thing a person did when they'd exhausted every rational option and had nothing left but hope that someone, anyone, would see and understand and care. Amanda stared at it. "What are you?" "Go. Now. Before they connect you to me." I kept my voice steady, despite the terror clawing at my throat. 10:30. Grove Street. "If I'm not there, call the police and tell them everything you know." She opened her mouth to argue, thought better of it, and fled toward the kitchen with the kind of speed that would have been unprofessional under any other circumstances. The 2 men were standing now, not walking toward me yet, but positioned like they were about to. Scar Eyebrow said something to his companion. The shorter man nodded and started moving toward the bathroom corridor, cutting off my only remaining potential escape route. This was it. The moment where my investigation ended, where I became another statistic, another missing woman whose family would spend years searching for answers that would never come. Except someone was watching. Table 12. 4 men in expensive suits, the kind of carefully tailored clothing that suggested wealth and power. I hadn't paid attention to them before, too focused on my own survival to notice other diners. But now I saw the way they sat, alert, aware, positioned with the same professional spacing as the cartel enforcers. And the man at the head of their table wasn't looking at his companions or his drink or the menu. He was looking at me. Dark hair swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and controlled intensity. Even from this distance, I could see his eyes tracking my expression. The napkin on my table. The two men now moving with clear purpose toward my location. He saw the message, saw the threat, processed the situation in the span of 3 seconds. Then he made a gesture so subtle I almost missed it. Just a slight movement of his hand. But his companions reacted immediately, positions shifting with practiced coordination. 2 of them stood and relocated themselves with seeming casualness. Except their new positions happened to place them directly between me and the approaching enforcers. The man from table 12 stood. He moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who'd never been afraid of anything in his life. Crossed the distance to my table in smooth strides that ate up space without appearing rushed. He sat down across from me without asking permission. Reached across the table. Picked up the napkin with my desperate plea written on it, and folded it calmly before placing it in his jacket pocket. "You're having a difficult evening," he said. His voice was low, controlled, with an accent I couldn't quite place. Not quite American, something Mediterranean bleeding through despite clear English. His eyes held mine with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "I'm going to help you, but you need to do exactly what I say. Do you understand?" I nodded because words had abandoned me entirely. "What's your name?" "Lauren." It came out barely above a whisper. "Lauren Reed." "Lauren." He repeated it like he was testing the weight of it. "I'm Gabriel. Those men who are currently reconsidering their approach. Do you know why they're interested in you? I'm a journalist. I've been investigating disappearances. I took photos near the port. I think I photographed them without realizing it." His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, understanding, or perhaps calculation. "And now they've found you." "Yes." Gabriel glanced toward the 2 enforcers, who had stopped their advance and were now engaged in what looked like a tense conversation with Gabriel's men. "They're going to leave now. But this isn't over. They know where you live, where you work, everyone you've talked to. You understand that, yes?" The reality of it hit me like cold water. "Yes." "Then you're coming with me." Not a request, not a suggestion. Those men answer to people who won't hesitate to make you disappear, and they're currently deciding whether to cause a scene in a public restaurant or wait for a more opportune moment. He stood, placed a hand on my shoulder. Firm, possessive. A clear signal to everyone watching. "Gather your things. We're leaving through the front entrance. Stay close to me." My body moved on autopilot. Grabbed my phone, my keys, my jacket. Stood on legs that felt disconnected from my brain. Gabriel kept his hand on my shoulder, guiding me toward the entrance like we were together. Like this was normal. Like I hadn't just written a plea for help, because I thought I was going to die. The 2 enforcers watched us approach. Scar Eyebrow's hand disappeared inside his jacket. Gabriel's men positioned themselves strategically, blocking any potential confrontation. For 5 seconds, the tension was so thick I could taste it. Metallic, sharp, dangerous. Then Scar Eyebrow's hand emerged empty. He nodded once, a gesture that somehow conveyed both retreat and promise of future confrontation. He and his companion walked out the front door ahead of us, disappearing into the rain-soaked night. Gabriel guided me out seconds later. The rain had intensified into a downpour that immediately soaked through my jacket. A black SUV with tinted windows idled at the curb, engine running, driver barely visible through the storm. Gabriel opened the back door and maneuvered me inside before following. The door closing with a solid thunk that felt impossibly final. "Drive," he said to the front seat. Fort Lee, the secure location. The SUV pulled away from Lucia's, leaving behind the warm light and the witnesses and the illusion of safety I'd tried to maintain. I finally found my voice. "Who are you?" Gabriel looked at me with an expression that wasn't quite sympathetic, but wasn't cold either. Something in between. Someone who just made a lot of complications for himself by interfering in cartel business. But we can discuss that when you're somewhere they can't get to you. He paused. Though I suppose you deserve honesty. My name is Gabriel Ricchetti. My family controls port operations in this area. Has for 3 generations. The men who were hunting you work for people trying to take our territory, which means you've accidentally walked into the middle of a war you didn't even know was happening. Mafia. He was mafia. I'd asked a crime boss for help, and he'd actually provided it. The irony would have been funny if I wasn't still shaking from adrenaline and terror, and the realization that I'd just traded one kind of danger for another. The safe house in Fort Lee wasn't what I expected. Not that I knew what to expect from a mafia hideout, but this felt less like a prison and more like an expensive hotel suite someone had fortified against invasion. Bulletproof windows. Reinforced door with 3 separate locks. Camera feeds showing the building's exterior on a monitor in the living room. Comfortable furniture in neutral tones that suggested a professional decorator rather than criminal pragmatism. Gabriel showed me the layout without commentary. Bedroom here, bathroom there, kitchen stocked with basics. A guard would be stationed outside 24/7. His name was Luca, Gabriel said, and he'd been with the family for 12 years. Trustworthy. Loyal. Concepts that apparently mattered in this world I'd stumbled into. Why Fort Lee? I asked, finally finding my voice after the silent car ride. You said Manhattan was neutral territory. This is still New Jersey. Still my territory. But Fort Lee has infrastructure we've maintained for years. Security systems, safe routes, people who know not to ask questions. Gabriel studied me with those unsettling dark eyes. You'll be comfortable here. More importantly, you'll be alive. He left before I could process whether that was reassurance or threat. Alone in the apartment, I locked myself in the bathroom and threw up. Adrenaline crash, terror belatedly catching up, the reality of my situation finally penetrating the shock that had insulated me since Lucia's. I'd asked a crime boss for help. He'd provided it. And now I was in his safe house, under his protection, which meant under his control. The woman staring back at me from the mirror looked younger than 27. Hair still damp from rain, mascara smudged beneath eyes that hadn't slept properly in weeks, the hollows in my cheeks more pronounced than they'd been before I started this investigation. I looked like exactly what I was. Someone in over her head, drowning, grasping at lifelines without checking if they were anchored to solid ground or sinking ships. My phone had 7 missed calls from Mark. I called him back, rehearsing excuses even as it rang. Lauren. Thank God. Where are you? Why didn't you meet your source? Something came up. I'm safe. I'll explain tomorrow. That's not good enough. Those messages you sent earlier, you sounded scared. What happened at Lucia's? I couldn't tell him. Couldn't say I'd been rescued by the Ricchetti family, that I was currently locked in one of their properties, that the line between journalist and compromised had blurred beyond recognition. Just trust me. I'm following a lead. I'll check in tomorrow morning, I promise. Mark's silence stretched long enough that I thought the connection had dropped. Then, Lauren, I've been in this business 30 years. I know when a reporter's in trouble. If you need help, real help, you call me. Immediately. Understand? I understand. I ended the call before he could push further, guilt sitting heavy in my stomach alongside the lingering nausea. The apartment had Wi-Fi. Of course it did. Probably monitored, probably tracked, but I needed information more than I needed privacy. I spent the first night researching Gabriel Ricchetti, compiling a profile the way I would for any investigative piece. The Ricchetti family had controlled port operations in northern New Jersey for 3 generations. Started with legitimate shipping in the 1950s, expanded into less legitimate ventures by the 1970s. Protection rackets, loan sharking, gambling. Nothing as brutal as drugs or human trafficking. There seemed to be lines even organized crime didn't cross. At least not publicly. Gabriel had assumed control 8 years ago after his father was killed in what newspapers called a targeted assassination by Russian competitors. He was 36. Never married, according to public records, though one gossip blog mentioned a long-term girlfriend who'd died 3 years ago. No children. No scandals. Just a carefully maintained presence at charity events and business functions. The respectable face of a family business that operated in shadows. While researching, I kept thinking about my parents. About the drunk driver who'd killed them on Route 80 5 years ago. About how he'd gotten 18 months for vehicular manslaughter and was released in 9 for good behavior. About how the system that was supposed to deliver justice had failed spectacularly, leaving me with grief and rage and nowhere to direct either. Now I was trusting a criminal to provide the justice that same system couldn't. The irony burned like acid reflux. But maybe that's why I wasn't more terrified. Gabriel operated outside the law, but at least he was honest about it. He didn't pretend to be something he wasn't. Didn't promise fairness while delivering corruption dressed in legal terminology. Gabriel returned the next morning with coffee from a place that clearly took the craft seriously. Rich, smooth, none of the bitterness I'd grown accustomed to from my own cheap beans. "You didn't sleep?" he observed, settling into the chair across from where I sat on the sofa. "Neither did you." The shadows under his eyes matched mine. "I had calls to make, arrangements to confirm." He sipped his own coffee, studying me over the rim. "Tell me everything about your investigation. Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." So I did. Laid out the entire timeline. Michelle Torres, Sarah Kim, Amanda Wells, the patterns I'd discovered, the warehouse surveillance, the photos I'd taken that captured faces I shouldn't have seen, how the silver sedan had been following me, how Amanda had agreed to talk before those men showed up at Lucia's. Gabriel listened without interrupting, his expression growing harder with each detail. When I finished, he set down his cup with enough force that liquid sloshed over the rim. "How long has this been happening?" "The disappearances started 6 weeks ago, but the warehouse activity, I only documented it over the past week." "And you sent this information to your editor?" "Preliminary findings. Nothing that would compromise the investigation or put him at risk." Gabriel stood, paced to the window, stared out at Fort Lee's streets like they held answers. "The cartel moving into human trafficking in my territory. That's not just a violation of agreements. That's a declaration of war. Your territory," I repeated. "You act like you own this city. Parts of it, yes. The port, the shipping lanes, certain business districts. My family has maintained these operations for decades, through carefully balanced relationships with other organizations. We don't traffic humans. We don't deal hard drugs. Those are lines we don't cross." He turned back to me. "The Sinaloa cartel knows this, which means they're either testing our boundaries or they don't care about consequences." "And what are the consequences?" His smile held no warmth. "That depends on how diplomatic I'm feeling when we have our discussion." The first 48 hours blurred together in frustration. I was used to moving, investigating, actively pursuing leads. Being confined felt like suffocation despite the apartment's space. But I forced myself to be productive, organized my existing evidence into coherent timelines, cross-referenced witness statements, built a framework for the story I'd eventually publish. Gabriel visited twice daily, always bringing food that was too good for me to have ordered myself. Thai takeout from a place I'd never heard of, Italian from a restaurant that required reservations months in advance. He never stayed long, just checked that I had what I needed, and left. On the third night, after he'd brought dinner and was preparing to leave, I stopped him with a question I'd been avoiding. "Why are you helping me? Really? Don't give me the territorial violation excuse. You could have let them take me, eliminated a witness, kept your hands clean." Gabriel paused at the door, hand on the knob. "You asked for help. That matters." He glanced back. "And you're trying to save women nobody else cares about. That matters too." The morning of the 4th day, Gabriel arrived earlier than usual. No coffee this time, just urgent energy that filled the apartment like ozone before lightning. I confirmed it. The cartel is using that warehouse to process women before moving them south. They've been operating for 3 months, bringing in girls from restaurants and bars, promising legitimate work, then trafficking them across state lines. His jaw tightened. 17 women have gone through that location. Your 3 disappeared, are part of a larger operation. The number hit me like cold water. 17. Not 3 isolated cases, but systematic exploitation. We need to tell the police, the FBI, someone with actual authority to... And how long will that take? How many more women will disappear while they build cases and file paperwork? The system you want to trust is the same one that failed your missing women in the first place. He wasn't wrong, which made it worse. So what do you propose? You eliminate them yourself? That makes you just as bad. No, Gabriel said quietly. That makes me effective, but I'm not suggesting murder. I'm suggesting we dismantle their operation our way. Fast, thorough, permanent. And then you document it all. Publish the story that forces official investigations. Give those families the answers they deserve. I should have refused. Should have demanded he take me to the police station immediately despite knowing how that would end. But sitting in that apartment, looking at the evidence I'd compiled over weeks of investigation, thinking about Michelle's mother and Sarah's roommate and Amanda's terror, I made a decision that probably damned whatever remained of my journalistic integrity. What do you need from me? Gabriel's expression shifted, something like respect crossing his features. Everything you've gathered. Every photo, every timeline, every piece of evidence. And your trust that I won't use this to destroy you later. Trust. From a crime boss. The absurdity would have been funny if the stakes weren't measured in lives. When do we start? Tonight. But first, you're going to tell me exactly what that silver sedan looked like. Because if cartel enforcers were following you, they know where you live. And that means anyone connected to you is a potential target. Amanda. Mark. My landlord who'd seen me coming and going. The barista at my regular coffee shop who knew my order by heart. Everyone became collateral damage in a war I'd triggered by trying to expose the truth. I gave Gabriel the details, watched him relay information to people whose names I didn't know, orchestrate protection for civilians who had no idea they needed it. In that moment, seeing him work with brutal efficiency to minimize harm, I understood why his family had maintained power for generations. It wasn't just violence and intimidation. It was this: the careful calculation of risk, the strategic deployment of resources, the cold pragmatism that accomplished in hours what bureaucracy would take months to fail at. And I understood something else. I wasn't a captive in this apartment. I was a collaborator. The distinction mattered, even if the consequences would be identical. Gabriel's proposal came with morning coffee on the 5th day. He set 2 cups on the kitchen counter and leaned against it with the kind of casual confidence that made the apartment feel smaller. I need you to make a decision, he said without preamble. Either we work together to dismantle this operation properly, or I take you to the nearest FBI field office and let the system handle it. Your choice. The system. The same bureaucracy that had let Michelle Torres's case go cold in 48 hours. The same machinery that filed reports and forgot faces while women disappeared into shipping containers bound for the border. What does working together mean? You give me everything you've collected. I use my resources to confirm details, track movements, identify key players. You organize it into something that forces official action once we've already extracted the victims. He paused. And you trust that I won't use any of this against you later. Trust. The word sat heavy between us. And in return, you get the story. Real justice for those families. And you stay alive long enough to publish it. I should have negotiated. Should have demanded guarantees, protections, something more concrete than his word. Instead, I heard myself say, when do we start? The next 2 weeks rewired my understanding of investigative journalism. Gabriel didn't just have sources. He had infrastructure. People embedded in Port Authority, customs, shipping companies. Within 3 days, he'd confirmed that the warehouse operation had been active for 3 months. 17 women processed through that location. Most moved to secondary sites in Texas and Arizona, before disappearing completely into trafficking networks. Mark's contact in the Port Authority provided independent verification, unaware he was corroborating intelligence from organized crime. I spent 12-hour days cross-referencing shipping manifests with surveillance footage Gabriel's people had acquired through methods I deliberately didn't ask about. Building timelines, mapping routes, creating documentation that could survive legal scrutiny. Amanda Wells called on day 6. Gabriel's security had tracked her down, offered protection she initially refused before accepting after a second approach by cartel enforcers. She was scared but willing to talk, finally. I should have spoken up when Michelle vanished. Amanda's voice cracked through the phone line. But I was terrified they'd come for me next. After I turned down their job offer, 2 other girls from Lucia's accepted. Maria Hernandez and Chloe Grant. Both disappeared last week. 2 more names from my growing list. 2 more families waiting for answers. You couldn't have known, I told her, though the words felt inadequate. I knew enough, she exhaled shakily. At least I know you're trying to stop them now. Gabriel arranged for Amanda to be relocated to his family's protection network, somewhere in Pennsylvania, he said, with people who owed him favors. She'd be safe until this was resolved. The work consumed daylight hours. But evenings brought different challenges. Namely, the growing awareness that Gabriel and I occupied the same space with increasing frequency. He'd arrive with dinner, stay while I worked, ask questions about my process. I'd catch him reading over my shoulder, making suggestions that demonstrated surprising grasp of journalistic standards. You need to remove this section, he said one night, pointing at my laptop screen. It implies knowledge of my family's legitimate shipping operations. Gives prosecutors ammunition to claim you're protecting me. I'm not protecting you. I'm protecting the integrity of the investigation. Same result. Different motivation. His shoulder brushed mine as he leaned closer to read. Change the phrasing here. Make it about general port corruption rather than specific businesses. He was right, which annoyed me more than the correction itself. Where'd you learn about journalistic ethics? I read. He moved away. Settled into the chair across from me. Contrary to popular belief, criminals aren't illiterate thugs. Some of us even went to college. Where? Rutgers. Business administration. Lasted 3 semesters before my father pulled me into the family operations full-time. He said it without bitterness, just statement of fact. What about you? Columbia. Journalism school. Graduated with honors and $80,000 in student debt. Your parents must have been proud. The opening was too perfect to ignore. They were. Right up until a drunk driver ran a red light on Route 80 and killed them both. 5 years ago. The driver got 18 months. Served 9. Gabriel's expression shifted. Not pity, but recognition. And that's why you do this. Why you chase stories nobody else cares about. Justice shouldn't depend on whether you're important enough for people to care. My voice came out harder than intended. Michelle Torres worked 3 jobs. Sarah Kim was putting herself through community college. They deserved better than being filed under probable runaways, because investigating took effort. Silence stretched between us, charged with something I couldn't name. Finally, Gabriel spoke. My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer. By the time we caught it, treatment options were limited to making her comfortable while we watched her disappear. The confession surprised me more than it should have. This man who controlled territory and commanded loyalty with a glance, admitting to helplessness. I'm sorry. She was 32. Had plans. Wanted children. A house somewhere quieter than Jersey City. Normal life away from family business. His jaw tightened. I gave her 3 years of marriage and a funeral. That's not your fault, isn't it? I brought her into this world knowing what it was. Knowing the stress, the danger, the constant looking over shoulders. Stress weakens immune systems, makes bodies vulnerable. That's not how cancer works. Logically, I know that. But logic doesn't eliminate guilt. He stood abruptly. I should go. You need to finish that section. He left before I could respond, the door closing with controlled precision that somehow felt more final than slamming. The event happened on day 12. Gabriel appeared mid-morning with a garment bag and expression that brooked no argument. There's a benefit tonight at the Waldorf. I need to make an appearance, maintain connections with legitimate business community. You're coming with me. Absolutely not. Lauren, the cartel knows you're missing. They're searching. If you're seen at my side at a public event, it sends a message. You're under protection. Touching you means declaring war. He set the garment bag on the sofa. Plus, I could use company. These things are insufferably boring. The dress inside was green emerald, floor length, elegant without being ostentatious. The kind of thing I'd never afford on freelance journalist income. I can't accept. It's not a gift. It's camouflage. Gabriel's tone left no room for negotiation. Car leaves at 7. Be ready. The Waldorf was everything I expected. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, people whose jewelry probably cost more than my annual income. Gabriel navigated the space with practiced ease, introducing me as a writer working on a piece about port modernization. Plausible enough that nobody questioned it, vague enough that conversations stayed superficial. I'd forgotten how it felt to be looked at as someone who belonged in spaces like this. The dress helped, as did Gabriel's hand at the small of my back. Subtle claim of association that kept unwanted attention at bay, until the drunk businessman decided proximity and alcohol made me available. "You're far too pretty to waste time on boring port talk," he slurred, pressing too close, breath reeking of scotch and entitlement. "Come have a real conversation with me." "No, thank you." I stepped back. He followed. "Don't be like that. I'm just being friendly." Gabriel materialized between us with the kind of speed that suggested violence was muscle memory. He didn't touch the man, didn't raise his voice, just positioned himself as physical barrier, expression communicating threat more effectively than words ever could. "The lady declined your invitation. Find somewhere else to be." The businessman's face went through several shades of red before survival instinct overrode alcohol courage. He retreated, muttering excuses nobody cared to hear. Gabriel's hand found mine, laced our fingers together. "We're leaving." The car ride back to Fort Lee happened in charged silence. I stared out the window, watching city lights blur past, hyper-aware of Gabriel beside me, his proximity, the warmth radiating from his body in the enclosed space, the way his jaw stayed tight, tension rolling off him in waves. "You didn't need to do that," I finally said. "Yes, I did. I can handle drunk idiots myself. I don't doubt that. But you shouldn't have to." He turned toward me, close enough that I could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Lauren, we need to address what's happening here. What's happening here? This, us. The fact that I can't stop thinking about you despite knowing it's the worst possible complication." My breath caught. "Gabriel, you're intelligent, brave, infuriatingly principled. You challenge me. Make me want things I convinced myself I'd given up." His hand came up, fingertips brushing my cheek with unexpected gentleness. "But my world is dangerous. People close to me become targets. I've already lost someone I cared about. I can't." I kissed him before he could finish the sentence, closed the distance between us and pressed my mouth to his, swallowing whatever excuse he was constructing. For 2 seconds, he froze. Then something in him broke. His hand tangled in my hair, pulling me closer as he kissed back with intensity that stole my breath. The driver cleared his throat. We'd arrived at the Fort Lee apartment, idling in the underground parking garage. Gabriel pulled away, breathing hard, forehead resting against mine. "This is a terrible idea. Probably. I'm not good for you. That's my decision to make." He kissed me again, softer this time, before the car door opened and reality reasserted itself. We made it to the apartment without speaking, tension crackling between us with every step. Inside, rational thought evaporated. Gabriel's jacket hit the floor. My dress followed. We moved from desperate to tender and back again, exploring this thing neither of us had planned but both wanted despite the impossibility. Later, lying in the darkness with his breathing evening out beside me, I thought about all the ways this would complicate everything, how it violated every professional boundary I'd ever maintained, how loving a criminal made me complicit in ways that would follow me forever. But I didn't regret it. Not then. Maybe not ever. Morning came with Gabriel's coffee, and a revelation I wasn't prepared for. He set the cup in front of me, expression carefully neutral in a way that immediately triggered alarm bells. "There's something you should know," he said, settling into the chair across from mine. 3 days ago, there was an incident. Cartel enforcers tracked one of my shipments near the port. They were attempting to send a message. The casual delivery made it worse somehow. What kind of incident? The kind involving weapons and a very clear boundary being tested. He met my gaze without flinching. We handled it. Nobody on my side was injured. The message was received and returned with interest. Heat crawled up my neck. 3 days ago. You've been here twice daily since then. When exactly were you planning to mention this? I wasn't. Not unless it became relevant to your safety. I stood. Needed to move. Needed space to process the anger surging through my bloodstream. Not relevant? They were close enough to confront your people. How close were they to this apartment? 2 miles. Different location entirely. 2 miles in New Jersey is nothing. My voice rose despite efforts to control it. You've been preaching about working together, about partnership, and you're still making decisions about what information I can handle? Gabriel's jaw tightened. I was protecting you from unnecessary worry about a situation that was already resolved. I don't need protection from information. I need honesty. I need to be treated like an adult capable of assessing my own risks. I paced the small space between living room and kitchen. You know what this is? This is exactly the kind of controlling behavior that makes people helpless. You think you're being noble, keeping me safe by keeping me ignorant. But all you're doing is making sure I can't make informed decisions. You want informed decisions? His tone sharpened. Fine. Informed decision. There are currently 6 known cartel enforcers actively searching for you. They have your description, your license plate, and they're monitoring known associates. Mark Sullivan was approached yesterday by someone claiming to be a delivery driver. Your landlord in Hoboken was asked if you'd collected mail recently. Your regular coffee shop had a customer who spent 3 hours watching the door. This is the reality I'm trying to protect you from experiencing every waking moment. The details landed like physical blows. Mark, my landlord, the barista who knew my order and always asked about my day. You should have told me, I said. Quieter now, but no less firm. I can handle scary truths. What I can't handle is discovering I'm making decisions based on incomplete information because someone decided I'm too fragile for reality. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken implications. Gabriel stood slowly, moved to the window, stared out at Fort Lee with tension visible in every line of his body. I don't think you're fragile. I think you're extraordinary. That's the problem. His voice dropped, rough with something I couldn't name. I've spent 8 years controlling everything. Territory, operations, threats. Control means survival in my world. But you, he turned partially, profile sharp against morning light. You challenge that. Make me want to share control instead of hoarding it, and that terrifies me more than any cartel. The admission caught me off guard, vulnerability seeping through cracks in his carefully maintained armor. Then let me in, I said, not as someone to protect, but as someone fighting beside you. Trust that I can handle the truth. Even when the truth is that people you care about are at risk because of your association with me. Especially then. Because hiding it doesn't change the reality. It just means I can't prepare. Gabriel nodded slowly, some of the tension bleeding from his shoulders. Agreed. Complete honesty from this point forward. About threats, about operations, about everything that affects your safety. But in return, you trust my judgment about tactical decisions. I've been managing these situations for years. Sometimes my instinct will tell me to move fast or hold back, and you need to trust that experience. I can do that, as long as you explain the reasoning afterward. Deal. The argument left us both drained, edges of adrenaline making the apartment feel smaller. Gabriel returned to his chair, scrubbed hands over his face in a gesture that made him look younger, more human than the controlled crime boss persona he typically projected. My wife used to hate this too, he said quietly. The way I'd shut her out when things got dangerous. She'd accuse me of treating her like delicate glass instead of the woman who chose to marry into this life knowing exactly what it meant. The mention of his wife surprised me. He rarely brought her up without prompting. What was her name? Sophia. She was a teacher. Elementary school. Complete opposite of this world. A sad smile ghosted across his face. She wanted normal, house in the suburbs, kids, PTA meetings. I kept promising her soon, after this deal, after that consolidation. Always soon, never now. She knew what she was getting into when she married you. Knowing intellectually and living with the reality are different things. By the time she got sick, I'd given her 3 years of marriage and a lifetime of delayed promises. He stood, walked to the window with restless energy. When she died, I told myself I'd never do that again. Never bring someone into my world who deserved better. Never make promises I couldn't keep about normal futures. My throat tightened. Gabriel, then you wrote help on a napkin and looked at me like I was someone who could still be good, despite everything. He turned, eyes holding mine with intensity that made breathing difficult. You're not her. You're nothing like her. You understand this world's darkness because you've reported on it. You're not asking for normal, but maybe that's why I can do this again. Because with you, I'm not pretending to be something I'm not. The confession stripped away pretense, leaving raw honesty that resonated in my chest. I crossed to him, stopped close enough to feel his warmth. My parents died because a drunk driver valued his convenience over their lives, I said. The justice system gave him 18 months. He served 9. That taught me something important. Institutions fail. They fail constantly, systematically, deliberately. So I stopped waiting for them to work and started forcing them to notice. That's what journalism is for me. Not objective reporting, but aggressive accountability. That's why you're here. Why you didn't walk away when you should have. I'm here because 3 women deserved better than being filed under probable runaways. Because 17 more deserve rescue before they disappear completely. And because sometimes justice requires working with people the system considers criminals. Gabriel's hand came up, cupped my face with unexpected gentleness. We're quite a pair. The crime boss and the crusading journalist. Terrible idea on paper. Worst possible combination. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. But somehow it works. The kiss was different this time. Less desperate, more deliberate. Like we were acknowledging something that went beyond physical attraction into territory neither of us had planned to navigate. His phone shattered the moment, sharp ring cutting through intimacy. Gabriel pulled away reluctantly, answered with clipped efficiency. When? How many? Secure the routes. I want eyes on every approach. And get me those surveillance feeds immediately. He ended the call, expression hardening into the controlled mask I'd come to recognize as operational mode. What happened? Intelligence just confirmed the cartel is moving their operation. They're planning to transport all remaining women out of the warehouse in 72 hours, moving them to secondary locations in Texas before the trail goes completely cold. 72 hours, 3 days. The window we'd been waiting for was closing faster than expected. Then we move now. No, we plan now. Move strategically. Rushing gets people killed. Both my people and the women we're trying to save. He was already pulling up files on his phone, sending messages. I need to coordinate with my contacts, verify logistics, ensure FBI positioning is ready without compromising operational security. What do you need from me? Finish compiling your evidence into the anonymous package. Make it airtight. Dates, locations, photographic documentation, witness statements. Something that forces immediate federal action even if the source can't be verified. While I'm handling tactical elements, you're building the legal case that keeps those women from being re-trafficked after we extract them. The division of labor made sense. His expertise in operations, mine in documentation. We spent the next 6 hours working in parallel focus, occasionally exchanging information, but mostly existing in shared determination. Gabriel made calls in rapid Italian, coordination I couldn't fully follow, but recognized as military-precise planning. I organized 63 photographs, 17 victim profiles, 40 pages of timeline analysis into a packet that would make any investigator's job simple. Here's the evidence, here are the perpetrators, here's how to prosecute them successfully. Evening arrived with takeout neither of us tasted, and exhaustion we both ignored. Gabriel finally closed his laptop, leaned back with the kind of weariness that came from carrying multiple lives' worth of responsibility. It's set. Thursday morning. Coordinated federal raid on the warehouse while my people create diversions that pull cartel security away from primary targets. We extract the women, disappear before official presence arrives. Let FBI take credit for rescue. And if something goes wrong, then we adapt. But nothing will go wrong. I don't allow operational failures. The confidence in his voice should have been arrogant. Instead, it was simply factual. A man stating reality based on years of not failing when lives depended on success. Thursday morning. 72 hours had become 48. The countdown was real now. Tangible, pressing against my ribs with every breath. Thursday arrived with the weight of inevitability. I'd been awake for 36 hours straight, fueled by coffee and the knowledge that 17 lives depended on documentation so airtight even the most corrupt prosecutor couldn't ignore it. My laptop screen blurred occasionally, exhaustion playing tricks with my vision, but I kept working. Every photograph properly labeled, every timeline cross-referenced, every victim profile complete with last known locations and identifying details that would make reuniting them with families possible. Mark's contact in the Port Authority had given me names of FBI agents who couldn't be bought, a short list that spoke volumes about institutional corruption. I chose Agent Sarah Whitmore, a woman with 15 years in human trafficking cases and a reputation for ignoring political pressure. The package would reach her desk by courier at 9:30 Thursday morning, anonymous but impossible to dismiss. Gabriel coordinated his side of operations with military precision. Phone calls in rapid Italian, maps spread across the kitchen table marked with routes and timing. His people would create diversions, small fires at cartel-controlled locations, traffic accidents blocking key roads, anything to pull security away from the warehouse when federal agents arrived. "Lauren, take a break." Gabriel's hand on my shoulder pulled me from the laptop. "You've been staring at that screen for 4 hours without moving. Almost done. Just need to verify these shipping manifests against... It's perfect. It's been perfect for the last 6 revisions." He closed the laptop gently but firmly. "If you don't sleep, you'll be useless when we need you alert." He was right, which I hated admitting. I let him guide me to the bedroom, collapsed onto the mattress still wearing yesterday's clothes. Sleep came fast and heavy, dreamless exhaustion that pulled me under like drowning. Gabriel woke me at 7 Thursday morning with news that made my pulse spike. "It's happening. FBI received the package. They're mobilizing a tactical team. Raid scheduled for 9:15. I was on my feet before fully processing his words, adrenaline burning through lingering exhaustion. "How do you know?" "I have someone inside. Not an agent, administrative staff who owes my family favors." She confirmed Whitmore took the package directly to her supervisor. "They're treating it as credible threat requiring immediate action." He handed me coffee, steam rising in lazy spirals. "My people are in position. Everything proceeds as planned." The next 2 hours crawled and sprinted simultaneously. Gabriel monitored communications on encrypted channels, relaying updates. Federal vehicles en route. Tactical team assembling 3 blocks from target. Cartel security still at full strength, unaware of approaching storm. 9:12. Gabriel's phone buzzed. He listened, expression hardening. "Understood. Hold position until I give clearance." He ended the call, met my eyes. "FBI is moving in. Radio silence from this point forward." We waited in suffocating quiet. I imagined the scene unfolding. Armored agents breaching warehouse doors, weapons drawn, shouted commands echoing off concrete. Women huddled in darkness, not knowing if this was rescue or something worse. Cartel enforcers making split-second decisions about fighting versus fleeing. At 9:47, Gabriel's phone rang. One-word conversation. "Confirmed. 17 women secured," he said, something like relief bleeding through his controlled facade. "FBI has custody. No casualties on either side. Clean extraction." The breath I'd been holding escaped in a rush. 17. Michelle Torres, Sarah Kim, 15 others whose names I'd documented but never met. Alive. Safe. Being processed through systems that would reconnect them with families and provide support services I'd carefully listed in my anonymous package. "Michelle and Sarah?" I asked, needing confirmation. "Both accounted for. Physically unharmed, though psychologically," he trailed off. "We both understood trauma didn't need visible wounds to be devastating." "And the third? The one from my original investigation?" Gabriel's expression closed. "Dead. 2 weeks ago. She tried escaping through a window. Fell 3 stories. Cartel disposed of the body in the river. Probably never would have been found if one of their enforcers hadn't talked during interrogation." I sank onto the sofa, grief and relief warring in my chest. 2 saved. 1 lost. Mathematics of tragedy. where every number represented shattered lives and devastated families. The FBI wants to interview survivors. Gabriel continued. I arranged for you to be present as anonymous journalist. Whitmore doesn't know your connection, thinks you're standard media presence. You'll have access to 3 women willing to talk. 3 hours later, I sat across from Michelle Torres in a sterile interview room that smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee. She'd aged a decade in the week since disappearing. Gaunt cheeks, haunted eyes, hands that wouldn't stop shaking. But she was alive. My mom? First words she spoke, voice cracking. Does she know I'm okay? She's being contacted now. You'll see her within the hour. Michelle collapsed forward, sobbing into hands that couldn't contain the sound. I sat quietly, let her break apart without trying to fix it, gave her space to process survival that hadn't seemed possible hours ago. Sarah Kim barely spoke. Trauma too fresh, too raw for words. She answered my questions with single syllables, gaze fixed on the table between us like eye contact might shatter her completely. I kept my questions gentle, gave her control over what she shared, didn't push when silence stretched uncomfortably long. 17 women rescued. The number echoed in my skull like a prayer and accusation simultaneously. How many others hadn't we reached? How many were being processed through different warehouses in different cities, invisible to everyone until they disappeared completely? I locked myself in the bathroom afterward, slid down the wall, and sobbed until my throat burned and my chest ached. Relief and rage and guilt tangled together into something I couldn't name. Gabriel found me there an hour later, sat beside me without speaking. Solid presence while I fell apart. That night, while media coverage focused on the FBI's successful raid and rescued victims, Gabriel executed the second phase. 3 cartel leaders vanished from their residences between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. No bodies found, no witnesses, just empty houses and messages received by surviving members. New Jersey belonged to the Ricchetti family, and human trafficking would never be tolerated again. The retaliation came 30 hours later. Friday evening, I was organizing interview notes when Gabriel's phone exploded with alerts. Get to the bedroom. Now. What? Someone leaked your location. They're coming. I ran. Made it 3 steps before the apartment's main door shattered inward, wood splintering around reinforced locks that bought seconds but not safety. Gunfire erupted. Sharp cracks that made my ears ring even through walls. Gabriel's security returning fire, Luca's voice shouting coordinates in Italian, more shots answering from the stairwell. I dove into the bedroom closet like Gabriel had shown me during safety briefings I'd thought were paranoid excess. Reinforced walls, panic button hidden behind hanging clothes. I pressed it, heard distant alarms trigger, and prayed backup would arrive before bullets found their way through drywall. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it started. Silence rushed in, somehow more terrifying than noise. Then Gabriel's voice, tight with barely controlled fury. Lauren, are you hit? No, I'm okay. I emerged from the closet on shaking legs. The apartment looked like a war zone. Bullet holes pocking walls, overturned furniture, broken glass everywhere. And Luca on the floor, blood spreading across his shirt, breathing too fast and shallow. Back at Columbia, I'd taken the newsroom's disaster reporting module, the grim one with tourniquets and pressure dressings. It wasn't a degree, but it meant I didn't freeze when blood appeared. My medical training kicked in despite trembling hands. Pressure on the wound, elevation, keep him conscious and talking. You're going to be fine, I told him, voice steadier than I felt. Ambulance is coming. Just stay with me. Luca's eyes found mine, unfocused but aware. Did my job, he whispered. Kept you safe. You did. You absolutely did. I pressed harder, felt warm blood seeping between my fingers. Now let me return the favor and keep you alive. Gabriel appeared beside me, phone pressed to his ear, demanding ambulance arrival times with barely contained violence. When he ended the call, he looked at Luca with expression I'd never seen. Raw fear badly disguised as anger. The hospital waiting room had industrial tile floors and lighting that made everyone look half dead. I sat with Luca's blood drying on my hands, shirt, jeans. Couldn't bring myself to wash it off yet. Felt like abandoning him somehow. Gabriel paced. Phone calls in Italian, each conversation brief and brutal. Ordering responses I didn't want to imagine. When they finally let us see Luca, I almost cried again. He looked smaller in the hospital bed, chest wrapped in sterile bandages, skin too pale against white sheets. Gabriel stood at the bed's foot, knuckles white gripping the rail. He has a daughter, Gabriel said quietly. 8 years old, plays soccer. I hadn't known. 6 weeks of working together, and I'd never asked Luca about his life outside protection duty. I'm so sorry. He chose this. That's what loyalty means. Gabriel's voice cracked slightly. But he shouldn't have needed to choose. We stayed until nurses insisted on rest. Drove back to Fort Lee in silence, heavy with unspoken understanding. This couldn't continue. The cartel would keep coming until someone ended the war permanently. Gabriel made the final call from the destroyed apartment. 48 hours of coordinated strikes, his people hitting cartel operations while anonymous tips flooded FBI hotlines. Financial accounts frozen through mysterious bank investigations. Shipping routes disrupted by sudden regulatory enforcement. 36 arrests, twice that many disappearances, the entire Sinaloa East Coast operation dismantled with surgical precision. By Sunday morning, the cartel had retreated completely. Territory conceded. Leadership decimated. And Gabriel Ricchetti's reputation as someone you didn't cross now included human traffickers alongside every other criminal enterprise that had learned this lesson the hard way. I sat in the wreckage of the apartment that had been my home for 6 weeks, surrounded by evidence of violence I'd survived, and understood I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. I wasn't just reporting on this world anymore. I was part of it. 3 weeks after the raid, I sat across from Mark Sullivan in his cluttered office at the Jersey Tribune, watching him read my story for the 5th time. He'd printed it out, made notes in red pen that bled through the margins like wounds. His reading glasses kept sliding down his nose. He'd push them up, squint at a paragraph, shake his head, continue reading. "This is dynamite," he finally said, setting the pages down with deliberate care. "National-level investigative journalism. Pulitzer-worthy, if I'm being honest." He removed his glasses, met my eyes directly. "It's also going to make a lot of powerful people very uncomfortable." "Good. That's the point." "Lauren." He leaned back, chair creaking under his weight. "I've been in this business 30 years. I know when a reporter has a source, and I know when they have something more than that." His voice dropped. "Whatever protection you had during this investigation, whoever provided it, they left fingerprints all over this story. Not in what you wrote, but in what you didn't write. The gaps are as revealing as the content." My throat tightened. "I documented everything I could verify independently. Every fact in that article has 3 sources minimum. The investigation is clean. The investigation is immaculate. That's what worries me." Mark tapped the manuscript. "Nobody gets this kind of access without connections. I don't want to think about too hard. Just promise me you know what you're doing, and that if you ever need to walk away, you will." I wanted to promise. The words wouldn't form. Mark seemed to understand. He nodded once, picked up his red pen. "We publish Friday. Front page, above the fold. And Lauren, be ready. This is going to change everything." The story ran with a headline that made my hands shake. "Invisible no more. Inside the human trafficking network that operated in plain sight. 4,000 words documenting systematic exploitation, police negligence, 17 rescued lives." I wrote about Michelle Torres's mother who never stopped searching. Sarah Kim's roommate who filed reports the police ignored. Amanda Wells's courage in escaping when accepting seemed safer. I mentioned an anonymous source with extensive knowledge of criminal operations in the port area, exactly once, buried in paragraph 12. Everything else came from official documents, survivor interviews, FBI confirmation. Gabriel existed nowhere in my published work except as carefully constructed absence. By Monday, the story had been picked up by the Associated Press. Tuesday, it was trending on social media. Wednesday, 3 major newspapers offered me staff positions with salaries that seemed fictional. Thursday, I received notification that the article had won the New Jersey Press Association's award for investigative journalism. Professional success I'd dreamed about for 5 years arrived all at once, and it felt hollow. I couldn't celebrate publicly with the person who'd made it possible. Couldn't thank Gabriel in speeches or interviews. Couldn't acknowledge that justice had required collaboration with someone the system defined as criminal. Mark called Friday evening. Amanda Wells just sent flowers to the office. Said to tell you she's engaged, working at a restaurant in Pennsylvania, finally sleeping through the night. Thought you'd want to know. Something loosened in my chest. Thank you for telling me. There are 17 families sleeping better because of your work. Hold on to that when the complications get overwhelming. The complications arrive Saturday, in the form of Gabriel's text. Need you at a meeting tonight. Atlantic City. Formal dress. Car picks you up at 6. Atlantic City meant the yearly gathering where New Jersey's organized crime families pretended to be legitimate businessmen discussing shipping contracts and real estate development. Gabriel had mentioned it once. Required attendance, elaborate theater, everyone knowing exactly what everyone else really did, but maintaining polite fictions anyway. Why do you need me there? His response came immediately. Because hiding you makes you vulnerable. Claiming you publicly makes you protected. The dress he sent was midnight blue, elegant without ostentation. I wore it with growing dread, understanding that whatever happened tonight would be irreversible. Going public as Gabriel's partner meant permanently joining his world in ways even living in his safe house hadn't accomplished. The venue was a waterfront hotel, the kind with valets in white gloves and doormen who never made eye contact. Gabriel met me in the lobby, took my hand without asking permission, and led me into a ballroom where 50 men in expensive suits pretended not to be measuring each other for weaknesses. Lauren Reed. He introduced me to a silver-haired man, whose ring probably cost more than my car. Investigative journalist. The one who broke the trafficking story. The man's eyes sharpened with recognition. Impressive work. Those families owe you everything. His gaze shifted between us, calculating. And you're here with Gabriel. How interesting. That word, interesting, carried implications I felt in my bones. We made rounds through the room, Gabriel introducing me consistently, clearly, as his, not his date, not his guest, but unmistakably his partner in ways that transcended a single evening. I shook hands with men whose names I recognized from police files, smiled at women who wore diamonds like armor, participated in conversations about port modernization that were really about territory and control. Then Anthony Ricchetti cornered us near the bar. He was shorter than Gabriel, stockier, with the kind of face that suggested charm layered over cruelty. 42, according to Gabriel's briefing. Ambitious since childhood. Frustrated by always being second. Cousin, Anthony's smile didn't reach his eyes. Introducing your journalist to everyone. Bold move. Not bold. Necessary. Gabriel's hand found the small of my back. Lauren's work brought positive attention to issues that matter. The families respect that. Do they? Anthony's gaze fixed on me with uncomfortable intensity. Or do they wonder if she's documenting our conversations for her next story? If Gabriel's judgment has been compromised by a pretty face and convenient circumstances? My judgment, Gabriel said quietly, removed a trafficking operation from our territory and prevented federal attention from landing on legitimate operations. Nobody here has grounds to question effectiveness. Your judgment started a war that cost us resources and exposed vulnerabilities. Anthony leaned closer, voice dropping. You're thinking with something other than strategy. It's making you weak. I felt Gabriel tense beside me, violence coiling beneath his controlled exterior. Before he could respond, I stepped forward. Weak? I looked directly at Anthony, channeling every confrontation I'd navigated as a woman in journalism. Gabriel eliminated an entire cartel operation in 48 hours, protected 17 trafficking victims, and reinforced territorial boundaries so clearly that nobody's tested them since. What exactly have you accomplished besides undermining your family's leadership? Anthony's face darkened. You should teach your pet journalist to show respect. She's not my pet. She's my partner. And she's right. You're questioning results because you wanted the authority to deliver them yourself. Gabriel's voice carried enough edge to cut. This conversation is over. We walked away before Anthony could respond, but I felt his glare drilling into my back. That was stupid of me, I muttered. I just made you an enemy within your own family. You made him show his hand publicly. Now I know exactly where he stands. Gabriel guided me toward the exit. We're leaving. This accomplished what I needed. When the apartment in Fort Lee turned into evidence, bullet holes and police tape, Gabriel moved me to his house in Englewood Cliffs. Same county, different kind of fortress. The retaliation came 3 days later. Someone leaked photographs to a tabloid. Me and Gabriel at the Waldorf benefit, at the Atlantic City meeting, leaving his house in Englewood Cliffs. The story wrote itself. Crime boss romance with crusading journalist. Ethics or scandal. My phone exploded with calls. News outlets wanting comments. Former colleagues questioning my integrity. 3 job offers quietly rescinded. Mark left a voicemail that was 2 minutes of heavy breathing before, "Call me. Now." Gabriel's investigation revealed the source within hours. Anthony, using family connections to media contacts, deliberately trying to destroy my credibility and force separation. I discovered it before Gabriel told me. Found emails Anthony had sent to journalists, complete with documentation about Gabriel's organization and implications that my trafficking investigation had been compromised from the beginning. He was planning to release everything publicly unless I walked away. I didn't walk away. I walked directly into the Ricchetti family meeting, interrupting Anthony mid-sentence about Gabriel's recent questionable decisions. Every head turned. Gabriel stood, expression dangerous. "Lauren, this isn't... Your cousin is trying to blackmail me." I placed my phone on the table, played the recording I'd made of Anthony's associate delivering his ultimatum yesterday. Leave Gabriel, or he releases documentation claiming my investigation was corrupt, that I've been compromised by criminal relationships, that everything I published was manufactured. The room went silent. Anthony's face drained of color. "Interesting strategy," I continued, voice steady despite my racing pulse. "Threatening to destroy an investigation that brought positive attention to all of you. 17 rescued women, national recognition for exposing trafficking, federal focus on cartels instead of legitimate shipping operations. But sure, blow it all up because Gabriel chose someone you don't approve of." I looked directly at Gabriel. "I'm not leaving. Not because of threats. Not because of politics. Not because loving you is complicated. He can release whatever he wants. I know my work is clean." Gabriel's expression shifted through shock, anger, and something that looked dangerously close to pride. He turned to Anthony with lethal calm. "You have 24 hours to transfer to European operations. Italy. You'll manage shipping contracts from Rome. If you're still in New Jersey Friday, you won't be anywhere at all." Anthony opened his mouth to argue. The man beside him, older with authority that didn't require volume, shook his head once. Anthony deflated visibly. "Meeting adjourned," Gabriel said. "Everyone except Lauren. Leave." The room emptied in 90 seconds. Gabriel waited until the door closed before crossing to me, hands framing my face with unexpected gentleness. "You confronted my cousin in front of the family." "Yes." "Defended your integrity and mine simultaneously." "Yes. That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed. Probably both." My voice shook now that adrenaline was fading. "Did I just make everything worse? You made everything clearer. The family respects strength. You just demonstrated more courage than Anthony ever has." He kissed me, soft and deliberate. "He leaves for Rome Monday. And you, Lauren Reed, just became the first journalist to survive confronting organized crime politics and come out stronger." Luca found me the next day at the Tribune offices, walking almost normally despite the chest wound that had nearly killed him 3 weeks ago. "Wanted to say thanks. For the soccer ball you got my daughter. She won't stop talking about the nice lady who saved her dad. You saved me first." "That's the job." He smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him. "But you didn't have to care afterward. Most people don't." He handed me an envelope. "From Gabriel. Instructions for if things go bad. Plans, contacts, escape routes. He wants you prepared." The envelope felt heavy with implications. Insurance policy and love letter combined. "Tell him I said thank you. Tell him yourself. He'd prefer that." Mark pulled me aside that afternoon, closed his office door, and studied me with 30 years of editorial experience written in every line on his face. "You're not leaving Gabriel." "No. This is going to follow you. Every story you write, someone will question your objectivity. Every investigation, someone will claim you're protecting criminal interests. I know. And you're okay with that? I thought about 17 rescued women. About justice that required working outside systems designed to fail. About loving someone the world said I shouldn't, for reasons that made sense on paper but ignored everything that mattered. I'm okay with it. Are you okay with keeping me on staff? Mark was quiet for a long moment. Your work is impeccable. That hasn't changed. But Lauren, no more organized crime investigations. Write about corruption, about injustice, about all the things you're passionate about. Just give me one area where I don't have to wonder if your personal life is affecting your judgment. Deal. I drove to Englewood Cliffs that night. Let myself into Gabriel's house with the key he'd given me last week. Found him in the study, surrounded by paperwork, looking exhausted and impossibly beautiful in the desk lamp's glow. Anthony's gone, he said without looking up. Took the first flight to Rome this morning. Won't be returning. Good. The family sent messages of support. Apparently your performance impressed people I didn't expect to impress. Also good. He finally looked at me. You know this is permanent now. Public knowledge, family politics, all of it. There's no going back to anonymity. I crossed to him, settled into his lap, felt his arms come around me automatically. Good thing I wasn't planning to go back. Gabriel's laugh was soft against my neck. Quite a pair we are. Terrible on paper. Absolutely catastrophic. His lips found mine. But somehow it works. Later, lying in his bed with city lights filtering through windows, I thought about all the ways my life had transformed in 8 weeks. From desperate journalist writing help on a napkin to this. Partnership that defied categories. Love that existed in spaces between law and morality. Choices that would define me forever. I didn't regret any of it. Not the complications, not the compromises, not the permanent mark this world had left on me. Some stories required living inside them to tell properly. This was mine. And I was just beginning. 6 months disappeared faster than I expected. The trafficking story became a case study in journalism programs, won awards I'd stopped counting, opened doors I'd previously only dreamed about walking through. The Tribune kept me on staff with a salary that let me pay off student loans and a title that sounded impressive on business cards. But the real work happened in quieter spaces. Investigations into municipal corruption that exposed 3 city council members taking bribes, a series on inadequate elder care facilities that forced regulatory reforms, stories about injustice that didn't require navigating organized crime politics or questioning my objectivity every time I submitted copy. Mark never asked directly if I was still with Gabriel. He didn't need to. The move from Fort Lee to Englewood Cliffs wasn't exactly subtle, and my new address appeared on paperwork he filed with HR. He just nodded when I told him, offered one piece of advice. Keep your professional reputation spotless. Give nobody ammunition to question your work. I took that seriously. Every investigation triple-sourced. Every claim documented beyond reasonable doubt. My writing became sharper, more precise, knowing that scrutiny would follow everything I published. The house in Englewood Cliffs felt like home faster than my Hoboken apartment ever had. Space to think, without walls closing in. Garden where I could actually breathe outdoor air without car exhaust. Gabriel's presence filling rooms with the kind of comfort I'd never expected to find, with someone whose world operated so far outside mine. Luca recovered completely from the chest wound that nearly killed him. He showed up one Saturday with his daughter Sophia, 8 years old with gap-toothed grin, and soccer ball she insisted I sign despite my protests that I knew nothing about sports. You saved my dad, she informed me with the absolute certainty only children possess. That makes you family. Family. The word meant something different now than it had 6 months ago. Gabriel's people treated me with respect that evolved past professional courtesy into genuine acceptance. I wasn't just the boss's girlfriend. I was someone who'd proven herself in ways they understood, standing ground against Anthony, refusing to be intimidated, choosing this life with full knowledge of its complications. Gabriel taught me Italian in the evenings, patient with my terrible pronunciation, amused when I confused vocabulary in ways that changed entire meanings. I forced him to museums on Sunday afternoons, art galleries he claimed to hate, but studied with intensity that suggested otherwise. We found balance between his world and mine, creating something that belonged to both without fully inhabiting either. Then Thomas Brennan started digging. FBI agents investigating organized crime weren't unusual, but Brennan brought obsessive energy that felt personal rather than professional. He filed FOIA requests about port operations, questioned witnesses from closed cases, showed up at Tribune offices asking for me by name with questions about my trafficking investigation that were technically appropriate, but felt like fishing expeditions. Mark pulled me aside after Brennan's third visit. That agent's not building a case. He's building something else. Be careful. I used every journalism connection I had, called in favors from contacts in Washington that Mark had introduced me to during the trafficking story's aftermath, found reporters who'd covered FBI corruption cases, prosecutors who knew Brennan's history. Slowly, pieces emerged. Thomas Brennan's younger brother had been killed 8 years ago by someone in Gabriel's organization. Not Gabriel personally. He'd barely assumed leadership when it happened. But Brennan blamed the entire Ricchetti family, carried grief that had calcified into vendetta. His investigation wasn't about justice. It was about revenge disguised as law enforcement. I wrote about it. Not for publication, for circulation among people who mattered. Sent carefully worded inquiries to FBI oversight. Made sure Brennan's supervisors understood that one agent's personal crusade was compromising institutional credibility. Applied pressure through bureaucratic channels that couldn't be ignored. 2 weeks later, Brennan was reassigned to white-collar crime in Nevada. Gone. Neutralized without violence, without confrontation. Just strategic application of information to people who valued institutional reputation over individual revenge fantasies. Gabriel found me on the back patio that evening, staring at nothing, processing what I'd done. "You protected me using the system I don't trust," he said quietly. "That's impressive. I protected us. There's a difference." His arms came around me from behind, chin resting on my shoulder. "Thank you." Mark called the next morning. Amanda Wells sent a message. She's engaged, working at some restaurant in Pennsylvania that does farm-to-table cuisine. Says she sleeps through the night now. Wanted you to know the happy ending stuck. I cried about that. Relief and joy and lingering grief for the woman we hadn't saved tangling together. 17 rescued, 1 lost. Mathematics that never stopped hurting even when celebrating victories. The proposal happened on an ordinary Sunday morning. Gabriel making coffee while I organized notes for an investigation into construction fraud in Newark. Domestic routine we'd fallen into without conscious decision. He set a cup beside my laptop, kissed the top of my head, then said, "Marry me." I looked up. He wasn't joking, wasn't dramatic. Just Gabriel being direct in the way that made everything else seem complicated by comparison. "That's not really a question." "Marry me?" he repeated with hint of amusement. "Better? Why?" "Because you're the center of everything that matters. Because I want legal documentation that you're permanently mine. Because waking up next to you every morning for the rest of my life sounds like the only future worth having. No ring, no prepared speech. Just honesty delivered with morning coffee, and implications that terrified and thrilled simultaneously. Yes, the wedding happened 2 weeks later. Small ceremony at the house with judge who owed Gabriel's family favors and didn't ask uncomfortable questions. Luca stood as Gabriel's witness. Mark showed up as mine, looking uncomfortable in formal attire but smiling genuinely when I walked into the garden where Gabriel waited. I wore champagne instead of white, truth in advertising, with dress that cost less than the shoes Gabriel's cousin's wife suggested I buy. Simple, elegant, mine. The vows weren't traditional. We wrote them ourselves. Honest about challenges we'd face, promises we could actually keep. Gabriel spoke in English and Italian, voice steady despite intensity in his eyes. I spoke about choosing this life consciously, about loving him despite and because of complications, about building something that honored both our truths. When the judge pronounced us married, Gabriel kissed me like we weren't standing in front of witnesses. Like this moment had rewritten futures that had seemed impossible 6 months ago. The reception was quiet dinner with the dozen people who mattered most. Luca made a toast about finding family in unexpected places. Mark offered dry commentary about journalists' terrible decision-making that made everyone laugh because they knew he meant it affectionately. Sophia presented a drawing of me and Gabriel she'd made at school. Crayon stick figures holding hands with enormous smiles. That night, lying in bed as husband and wife instead of partners navigating undefined territory, Gabriel traced patterns on my shoulder and asked, "Any regrets?" "Not one. Even knowing how complicated this makes everything?" "Especially knowing that." I turned to face him. Simple would have been boring anyway. 3 months later, I sat in my home office working on the construction fraud investigation, documenting illegal waste disposal, bribery schemes involving city inspectors, safety violations that had nearly killed workers, important work that didn't involve organized crime except tangentially. Gabriel appeared in the doorway carrying plates of pasta he'd cooked himself, another skill I'd discovered after moving in. His cooking surpassed mine by embarrassing margins. Take a break. Eat something that isn't coffee and determination. I saved my work, closed the laptop, joined him at the kitchen table we'd picked out together last month. Ordinary domestic evening that contradicted the extraordinary circumstances of our lives. Mark's editor called about another award nomination. I mentioned between bites. They're annoyed I keep winning things while refusing to take the staff positions bigger papers offer. You prefer autonomy over prestige. I prefer being able to look at myself in the mirror while doing work that matters. I studied him across the table. Speaking of which, how was your day of definitely legitimate shipping contract negotiations? His laugh was warm, familiar. The sound of someone who understood I wasn't questioning his morality, but acknowledging its complexity. Profitable and legal, mostly legal. The gray areas were very gray. As long as nobody got trafficked or murdered, I'm declaring success. Such high standards from my wife. My wife. The phrase still felt new. Would probably always feel slightly surreal. We finished dinner, cleaned up together, fell into the evening rhythm we'd constructed from 2 very different lives. Later, in bed with city lights filtering through windows, Gabriel pulled me close and whispered something in Italian I'd learned meant, "My heart." I whispered back in fractured Italian that made him smile. Telling him I loved him in a language I was still learning, would probably always be learning. Just like I'd always be learning how to navigate the impossible life we'd chosen together. Some stories didn't have neat endings. Some involved living daily in spaces between right and wrong, justice and compromise, love and complications. This was mine, and I'd make that choice again every single morning.